are two teams that I felt like were ranked way too low based on their resume, their eye test, all of the above. And that's Indiana and BYU. Indiana and BYU were ranked, way too low. I'm looking at this and I see where they're at, and I just think to myself, there is only one conclusion for Indiana and BYU being where they are, and that is brand bias. There's no other conclusion. There just really isn't. I'm a big believer in the eye test. This is how I rank teams. I've covered both of these teams in home games. I've watched all of their tape, and I think Indiana is far better than what the committee ranked them. Now, to be fair, I have BYU at 10, so even below what the committee ranked them. But again, I am unapologetically just about the eye test and the film. And to me, BYU is about 10. Now, the inconsistency is that if you want to use the eye test, Indiana would be far better and far higher than what they are right now in the ranking. And in the rankings, you're telling us because of a team like Texas or Tennessee or Penn State that the eye test matters. And I'm here to tell you that like Indiana passes the eye test more so than even some of those teams. What other team right now has the type of performance resume, and I'm not talking about schedule resume, but performance resume of Indiana? They've beaten every team that they've played by 14 or more. Their average margin of victory right now is in the high 20s, is like 29. They're the number 2 scoring offense in the country. They're the number 7 scoring defense in the country. This is a really freaking good football team. And if they had any other logo on the side of their helmet, they would be ranked a lot higher. And I think that the same could be said about BYU, because listen, if you want to say like they don't have the actual schedule resume in order to be ranked higher, you might have an argument. And I get it. You see their strength of schedule. It's sitting there at, 103rd, but their point differential right now is first. Their best wins, not great, Nebraska and Washington, but they're still 9-0. So maybe they don't pass the resume test. But here's the problem is that if we're just going by a resume test, then that means BYU would be higher, which they're not. So the inconsistency of the College Football Playoff Committee is what is so infuriating for me. It's infuriating, which speaks to a clear brand bias in that room. If either of these teams had a different logo on the side of their helmet, they'd be ranked a lot higher, because there's not a lot of difference between these resumes and what Miami has given us, and they're right up there. What's the difference? Miami is Miami. They have national championships, and they have a brand in our sport. If you're going by resume, BYU is sitting there with 2 top 20 wins. So they've beaten SMU, which right now is looking great in the ACC. That was on the road. They've beaten Kansas State. This is a team that a lot of us think highly of, and I think still could play themselves into the Big 12 championship game. Those are 2 top 20 wins. The committee themselves thinks highly of SMU and thinks highly of Kansas State. BYU's strength of schedule is a lot higher than Indiana. Their strength of record is in the top 5 in the country. We've seen them win games in several different ways. We've seen them win with offense. We've seen them win with defense. We've seen them win with special teams. This seems like a team of destiny. Really gritty quarterback in Retzlaff. I like him a lot. It's a veteran defense that's very tough at the defensive line. If you're going by resume, BYU would be higher. If you're going by eye test, Indiana would be a lot higher. Indiana and BYU are getting screwed based on brand bias. It is so evident and clear that it's beyond funny at this point. I'm just going to do something. This is going to cement this for all of you. Let's take a look at a couple of other brands from previous years. And I know that the committee is not exactly the same as they've been in previous years, but there are a lot of the same people. And so you do have to understand that every committee is going to be a little bit different in terms of their fingerprint of what they prioritize and how they rank teams versus previous iterations of the committee. Having said that, it's never all that off. And last year, we had 2 teams that were major brands that we all thought very highly of from the beginning of the year. So those are 2 things that BYU and Indiana don't have at their disposal this year. So they didn't start high in the rankings to begin with in terms of the AP poll or what we thought of them as a college football public. And they don't have major brands, right? They're not blue bloods of the sport. They don't generate massive ratings for their games. Okay. But last year, there were two teams that have huge brand and we thought a lot of early in the season. And guess what? Their resumes at this point in the year are identical to Indiana. So I'm not even going to give the committee the benefit of the doubt of like, well, they're just going by the letter of the law and the resume. No. Screw that. This committee showed me last year that they would overlook that if you had the brand and if you had what I would call the preconceived bias that you're a great program. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This year, Indiana is 9-0, strength of schedule 103. Their point differential is 32.9, and they're ranked 8th in the country. They were unranked to begin the year. Last year, we had Michigan and Georgia. Both of these teams, they started the year far different. They started the year ranked 2 and 1 in the country. You're looking at the Michigan one right now. So Michigan was started ranked number 2 in the country. At this point last year in the first playoff rankings, Michigan was 8-0. Their best wins were Minnesota and Rutgers. Their strength of schedule was 111th. Remember, Indiana's is 103, and their point differential was 34.8. So only two points more in terms of point differential per game. And yet, where was Michigan sitting? Number 3 in the first college football playoff rankings. Number 3. Now we look at Georgia. So Georgia was sitting here last year, and Georgia was 8-0. Georgia's best wins were Kentucky and Florida. Their strength of schedule was 100th. Remember, Indiana's 103rd. And their point differential last year per game was 25.8. So basically 7 points less, a touchdown less in terms of differential. And they were ranked number 2. So the committee showed us last year that if you have the preconceived notion that you're a great program, and if you've got that blue blood brand on the side of your helmet, or if you've got those maize wings on your helmet, that they will overlook your poor resume as long as you're undefeated and as long as you're taking care of business and beating teams by wide margins. But that's not offered to Indiana this year. That is a case study in brand bias. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.